This week on Vaticano, Pope Francis calls the bishops of the Mediterranean region to be peacemakers at a special gathering in the Italian coastal city of Bari. Stay with us to learn about the virtues that drive the Knights of Columbus and find out about their 100 years of activity in Rome, and witness the original look of the Sistine Chapel with Raphael's tapestries. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. Pope Francis traveled to the southern Italian city of Bari to gather with more than 50 bishops from 19 neighboring countries to participate in the Mediterranean Frontier of Peace meeting. The Italian Bishops' Conference organized this 5-day event to focus on issues of the Mediterranean region, ranging from political instability, the migration crisis, persecution of Christians, and war.
War can never be mistaken for normality or accepted as an inescapable way to regulate divergences and opposing interests. Never.
The Holy Father underscored the importance that Christians work for peace through dialogue in the Mediterranean area, especially in the Middle East and North Africa. These two regions are currently threatened by instability and conflict between various ethnic, religious, and confessional groups.
There is no reasonable alternative to peace, because every attempt at exploitation or supremacy demeans both its author and its target. It shows a myopic grasp of reality, since it can offer no future to either of the two. War is thus the failure of every plan, human and divine.
Come il fallimento di ogni progetto umano e divino.
After the meeting with the Mediterranean bishops in the Basilica of St. Nicholas, Pope Francis prayed in the crypt, venerating the relics of the saint. St. Nicholas lived in the 3rd century. He's one of the most venerated saints among all Christians. The faithful called him Nicholas the Wonder Worker because of the many miracles and graces worked through his prayer. During his lifetime, St. Nicholas used to secretly help people, giving them alms and gifts. And from these actions, he became a prototype of Santa Claus. After the short prayer in silence, the Holy Father addressed the people of Bari, asking them to continue to pray so that the Lord can resolve the problems of the Mediterranean region. During his homily for Sunday Mass celebrated in front of St. Nick's Basilica, the Holy Father explained what Jesus meant by his commandment, love your enemies.
The Lord was not cautious. He did not yield to compromises. He asks of us the extremism of charity. This is the only legitimate kind of Christian extremism, the extremism of love.
Pope Francis' message to the bishops of the Mediterranean was precisely this one: to develop the culture of welcoming and love in order to fight against rancor and anonymity. The Knights of Columbus are celebrating 100 years in the city of Rome. For this occasion, the Supreme Knight came to Rome to meet the Pope, presenting him with the book, The Knights of Columbus in Rome, A Century of Friendship.
Well, we began in 1920 with the request by Pope Benedict XV to establish sports centers for the youth of Rome. So we've done 100 years of these sports centers, and even during the Second World War, we kept our centers open. Then we've had a very important partnership with the Holy See in terms of communications. and making the Holy Father's Midnight Mass at Christmas, Easter, and many other events broadcast around the world on satellite. So cooperation with the Holy See on communications initiatives. Then there's been the work we've done with the Fabbrica di San Pietro, which is the restoration and protection of the priceless works of art in the Vatican. And so repairing the facade of St. Peter's, very important, various different chapels and works of religious art. So we've done that. And then I would say the fourth area of initiatives for us have been more directly in terms of evangelization, working with agencies such as the Pontifical Commission for Latin America in ways of evangelization, also sponsoring different activities at many World Youth Days and other world meetings of families with the Holy Father. So those, I think, are the four general areas.
The order was founded in 1882 by Father McGivney, who served discriminated Irish Catholic families in New Haven, Connecticut. Basing his work on solid principles, the same principles on which it is still based today.
We were founded on the principles of charity, unity, and fraternity. So if we reach back into history, the knightly virtue of charity, if you did not have charity, you were not a good knight. Also, a knight had to have fortitude, courage to stand forth and live a life based on the Christian virtues, which we try to do as well. So I would say our principles, founding principles, charity, unity, fraternity, and then patriotism. Holy Father, thank you very much.
Pope Francis met in private audience the Supreme Council of the Knights of Columbus and praised the order's work.
I think we could narrow down his message to keep doing what you have been doing. That is, to be working in charity, to be open and to be inclusive in terms of our works of charity, to continue to be a strong supporter of the Pope, which we are, and to continue to help in the work of the Church's mission of evangelization.
I Cavalieri di Colombo proseguono la loro opera di carità evangelica e fraternità.
So I would say it was very, very warm address of the Holy Father to us and very meaningful to us, and a great encouragement to continue charity, unity, fraternity in solidarity with our bishops, our priests, and of course our Holy Father.
Unusually, Pope Francis met the Knights for a second time in just 1 week, joining them after a Mass celebrated in the Pauline Chapel of the Apostolic Palace. His particular attention to the Knights and their families shows a great respect and the importance of their work for the Catholic Church. In a few moments, we'll be back with more on Vaticano. At the UN in Geneva, the Holy See participated in this interactive dialogue on water and sanitation. They called to mind that, in fact, the Declaration on the Human Right to Water and Sanitation considers water essential for the full enjoyment of life and all human rights.
When we are talking about the water, we have to say, as seen in the history, that water was somehow also basis for the civilization. All big civilizations were developed around the sources of good water. It means if we have not water or we have bad water, we have more poverty, we have more unjust society, we have no justice. We talk about countries that are in extreme danger. And those countries are already poor countries. And those countries have so many difficulties. If the Church is not voicing in on their behalf, we are going not to do service to the mankind. water will be the cause of well-being of all the world. So it means if poor people are not happy and poor people have not resources, it means also the world, developed world is going to suffer. We see that in migration, many other things. So it means it's a common interest, and the Church must stand behind this common interest.
The Holy See reminded the Forum that water is indispensable for social development, and access to it for essential human needs is a fundamental, inalienable, universal right.
Accessing water in sufficient quality and quantity is also the basis for any country to ensure the potential of its economic development. The continuing contamination, depletion, and unequal distribution of water exacerbates existing levels of poverty. What we can see today in, let's say, in the feeling, also political feeling, or the, let's say, in political society and the political life, is that all of a sudden we see young people discovering a big concern for the future. Why we have such an incredible sensibility for the environment today? Not because we have such a bad environment. We probably have quite a good environment today. But people know, and young people know better than the others, and young people are not thinking only on the money, but they're thinking on their future life. They see that their future is in danger if we don't take care of water. But not only water, of every human resource, let's say, of the environment. And I think it is also biblical, let's say, from our point of view, for the point of view of the Catholic Church. It is part of our thinking, understanding the world, no? We have to think how to protect, how to share, how to improve the quality, and how to give it access to everybody. But this is somehow the calling of the gospel, and we are staying behind that. And Pope Francis, it was one of his big inspirations of his pontificate, that he started to promote also visibly this concern for the environment, especially for water.
The Holy See holds the strong belief that without the realization of the right to access to water, the freedom of people is violated and further aggravates inequalities, crises, and misery all over the world. Students from 19 different countries have graduated from the Safeguarding of Minors course at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome. The aim of the course is to provide participants with the appropriate tools to combat the problem of the abuse of minors in their countries. Cardinal Blaise Supich, in charge of the U.S. Bishop's Commission for the Protection of Minors, was on hand for the occasion. He pointed out two practical strong points of this course.
The first is that it will equip those who graduated today with the skill set that they will need in order to help their dioceses put in safe environment programs. But the other is it'll create a network, as Father Hans mentioned, a global network by which they're going to be supportive of each other and impress upon, I think, the Church throughout the world that this is a global issue. It's not just isolated in certain countries.
This year, among the participants were 11 students from the African continent. In Africa, the problem of child abuse is particularly sensitive, but incredibly, very little information is available, since harmful traditional practices like child marriage are still prevalent in some parts of the continent. According to the public data from UNICEF, nearly 1 in 3 teenage girls have been beaten or hit since the age of 15, and 1 in 10 raped or sexually abused. 4 out of 10 girls aged 20 to 24 were married before their 18th birthday. In the west and central regions of Africa, a quarter of all girls are victims of genital mutilation. Less than half of all children under 5 in West and Central Africa are registered at birth.
And Father Daniel from Nigeria.
Father Daniel Kyom from Nigeria is the chairman of the Safeguarding Commission in the province of Kaduna. He's happy that recently the Church in Africa has begun taking the issue of the abuse of minors more seriously.
The Church is leading. Like I said, it's a global problem. It's a human issue. But I think the Church has put itself in the forefront to lead the world, I will say, in this campaign to protect children and vulnerable adults. So I will propose a program, to my bishop, a program that will see the formation, preventive formation for priests, for religious, for all church workers, those who work in the name of the church in the Archdiocese of Kaduna, will be trained.
Benjamin Masawoya is one of the lay people in the course. For him, one of the strongest moments of the course was identifying the key causes of the abuses.
From my experience and then from the sharing that we've had throughout this course, I feel that in Africa, I think the cultural elements, we have a lot of harmful cultural practices that are kind of promoting, I think, abuse of minors and vulnerable adults. And I could really feel it from even my classmates from other parts of Africa. That was kind of a common denominator. And we all feel that one of our tasks is to combat such kind of harmful cultural practices. Our preventive measures, they will be useless if they don't really address like the cultural problem.
Sister Jacinta Ondeng of Kenya agrees with Masawoya, saying that the culture of silence must be fought.
Many of us think that this problem is not a problem for Africa. It is a global problem. I wish to remind us that we need to move from that level of denial, because denial will not help us. It will complicate things for us in the future. We need to accept that there are situations where we are not doing well in terms of protecting children, and we need to find ways of dealing with this. In my protection class, I think it's very important that we develop some strategies that will help us to avoid the problems that we are hearing in the news, we are hearing from the global church about children being abused. And Africa cannot run away from that. Kenya cannot run away from that.
Teresa Sanyatwe from Zimbabwe shared that only recently the country banned corporal punishment in schools. It's a good step, but it's not enough. More needs to be done, she said.
However, coming here at Gregoriana University to train as a safeguarder, my initiative is to go and suggest to my bishops at the Zimbabwe Catholic Bishops' Conference to start a child safeguarding commission so that these issues may be handled in the church. Because if you look at people in Zimbabwe, the biggest number are Catholics. And many parents, they like to send their children to Catholic institutions. So if we start from the church to educate parents, especially on the good practices of safeguarding children. Actually, I have learned from CCP here that it's not children who have responsibility of looking after themselves or caring after themselves. And if I look at our programs, we're focusing children in schools. So this education, this knowledge is going to change my approach when I go back to focus on adults and parents so that they safeguard children.
After the course, the students returned to their countries to make an impact on the political, social, cultural, and religious dimensions of their society. The Center for Child Protection at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome is aiming to lay foundations for the protection of minors through these students worldwide. This course is seen as a great example of how the Catholic Church is taking action in the sexual abuse crisis. We'll be back after a short break with more on Vaticano. On the occasion of the 500th anniversary of the death of the great Italian Renaissance artist Raffaello Sanzio, or simply Raphael, the Vatican Museums paid tribute to the artist by decorating the Sistine Chapel with 10 of his tapestries. For a whole week, visitors had the opportunity to enjoy the sight of the Sistine Chapel in all of its glory.
Raphael that represents in some way the highest example of Renaissance art. Through Raphael we want to share the values not only of art but also faith that Raphael represents, specifically for his project for the Sistine Chapel.
The masterpieces were returned to the Sistine Chapel 500 years after their creation. In 1515, Pope Leo X commissioned Raphael to design the tapestries with images from the lives of Saints Peter and Paul.
Raphael, together with Leo X, conceived the iconographic project of the tapestries that are the history of Peter and Paul. So it's the way that the apostles brings the gospel to people, to the world. And so in this place that is a universal place of art and faith, we have incredibly also the gospel given to the people. Thanks to Raphael, thanks to Leo X.
Raphael designed the tapestries in Rome, but they were made in the workshop of Peter van Elst, the famous European textile manufacturer from Belgium. Thanks to the work carried out by the Vatican Museums, the tapestries returned for a short period to their original places, where they hung in the chapel in the first half of the 16th century.
Poi abbiamo dovuto anche dal punto di vista tecnico.
We also had to, from a technical point of view, work out a number of things so that, for example, the tapestries have all been lined so that they are in contact with the pictorial surface. We've monitored all the ancient hooks on which they were hung. So it was a great job and, among other things, a great effort to hang them because they are tapestries that weigh up to 130 pounds and surfaced over 300 square feet, and for this reason it is not easy to hang a thing of this size.
Quindi non è facile appendere un tipo di manufatto del genere.
This exposition is an homage to the genius of Raphael, an exposition the artist never saw himself because of his unexpected death at the early age of 37. The anniversary the world is remembering today, 500 years later, giving us reason to thank God for his short life, during which he managed to make a lasting impression, communicating heaven through his art.